go ahead and get started.
Okay. There we go.
All right. Chris, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I am now.
Okay. Well, just welcomed you as the internal auditor at Wichita State University to walk us through the board policy for internal audit and also to review the internal audit plan. So welcome, and we'll turn it over to you.
All right, very good. To introduce internal audit at Wichita State, I'd like to start with a question. Can you think of anyone working at a university who does not have a role in risk management? I can't think of anyone. What percentage of university employees know they have a role in risk management? As the internal audit director at Wichita State, I pondered how to help our people better understand their role in risk management and the university's control systems. Luckily for me, WSU is a national leader in badge courses. That leadership gave me the foundation to create a badge course on risk management and internal controls for WSU employees. President Muma was the first to complete the course, and he promptly posted his digital badge on his LinkedIn profile. He is now the program's biggest booster. We want to heighten our people's understanding of their role in risk management. It's not solely the responsibility of executive management. Everyone has a role, and everyone doing their part is essential to the university's success. Internal audit's role is part of a comprehensive risk strategy at WSU. The university's internal audit charter is in Chapter 1 of the WSU Policies and Procedures Manual, which covers the university structure. The charter's prominent placement in Chapter 1 underscores its importance. We're built into the university structure. The charter affirms the independence of internal audit. In all my years at WSU, no one has ever asked me to look the other way or to suppress my reporting. The charter also requires that we adhere to professional internal audit standards. In that regard, WSU was the first Regents University to undergo a quality assurance review by a team of independent peer reviewers from other universities. A quality assurance review is like an accreditation visit for internal auditors. The peer review team affirmed our conformance with professional internal audit standards and was complimentary of our work. Moving to page 2 of my report now. Oh, thank you, Elaine. Over the past few years, we have page 2. One more.
Getting there.
Technology. There we go. All right. Moving to page 2, WSU has been very responsive to risk. Over the past few years, we have invested significant resources to address several high-risk areas common in higher education. These include a more robust strategic planning process that draws from multiple unit-level plans with public dashboards to monitor progress. It's essential that our information systems routinely capture critical information to support effective decision-making. Hiring our first Chief Information Security Officer, a position that is independent from the Chief Information Officer. Hiring our first Chief Privacy Officer to oversee the protection of personal information. Increasing staffing in our Civil Rights and Title IX office to better address issues at an early stage. Beefed up conflict of interest reporting requirements with expanded guidance about what to report. Any or all of these areas are likely to appear on any university risk assessment. WSU has taken steps to get in front of them. Page 3, please. Very good. All right, moving to page 3, my activities in 2024 were a mix of assurance and consulting engagements. Assurance provides confidence that things are as they should be. Consulting is collaborating with departments to make something better or solve a problem. My activities tend to lean toward consulting, and these are the areas receiving my attention in 2024. KMUW Radio, the University Conferences Office, Conflict of Interest Reporting, the Speech Language Hearing Clinic, the Center for Management Development, the Advanced Education and General Dentistry Clinic, the Office of Financial Operations and Business Technology, the WSU Athletic Association, the WSU Foundation, and I coordinated the university's response to the legislative post-audit last winter. On page 4, I summarize our plans for 2025. I meet with President Muma monthly to discuss internal audit activities and plans. As we look ahead to the new year, we assess what activities to undertake and continue, leaving room for unknown projects. Yeah, there you go. This agile approach has worked best for our one-person audit department and facilitated a timely response to the legislative post-audit last winter. It worked again when the CMD director resigned, leaving issues requiring follow-up in multiple departments. My work with the Athletic Association, KMUW Radio, and the College of Health Professions clinics will continue in 2025. All are facing financial headwinds and are dependent on outside revenue. I will also help athletics and KMUW with their financial statement audits, and the WSU Foundation has asked me to work with them again. My status as a one-person department occurred when I lost a position during a budget crunch a few years ago. Since then, as discussed, the university has invested significant resources to counter risk in prominent areas. Nevertheless, a university of WSU's size and research focus needs more than one internal auditor. President Muma and I will be exploring how to accomplish this. We are approaching 300 individuals who have earned the WSU Internal Control All-Star Digital Credential, with more than 200 doing so in the past year. The program took off last summer when Executive Vice President John Tomlin earned his and encouraged leaders in his industry and defense division to do the same. In 2025, we will continue to promote and grow the All-Star Credential, further broadening campus-wide risk awareness and enhancing the university's control environment. Toward the end of our badge course, we examine a case from California where issues in a department with a lax control environment start small but escalate out of control. By enhancing our employees' awareness of potential risks, we aim to reduce the likelihood of similar incidents occurring at WSU. Each individual who earns the credential receives a small memento in addition to their digital badge for their desk or bookshelf. The memento provides a proactive reminder about the individual's valuable contributions to the university's control environment. I have one right here. It looks nice on the bookshelf. See it here? So there's an image on acrylic of the digital badge, but it sits there on the bookshelf, and it's just a way to remind people about how important their role is in the university's risk processes and internal control systems. That's my report. What questions do you have?
Well done, Chris. Regent Dykes.
Chris, did I understand, did you say a one-person internal audit department?
Yes, yes, we're going to be working to address that.
Great.
Thanks for sharing the video with us too.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if it, it would be, that was one part. There's 8 parts to that video. It would really be beneficial for the audit committee. You might want to look for it, and I'd be happy to send you a memento of your own. And it gives you a good foundation of what control systems are like at colleges and universities.
Well, to your first point, Chris, risk management certainly is a role that everybody should have a part in. And so great job involving the entire campus.
All right, appreciate that.
Any other questions for Chris? All right, Chris,
All
thank
right.
you so much.
All right, see you next year.
All right, moving on. We'll now receive an overview of the fiscal year 2025 Board of Regents office budget. And I believe Becky Audubon is here to present that to us. Welcome, Becky.
There. All the regions should have a memo in front of them that outlines our office budget for the year. It contains information about it, including a table that goes over our actual cost for 23 and 24 and the budget for 25. This does not include flow through funding, which would be the assistance to universities, grants, aids to local governments. Those are the exclusion. The system total, though, which includes that information, is 1.37 billion of SGF. 67.8% of that goes to the state universities. The remainder comes to the board. And of the amount that comes to the board, 1.4% or 6.2 million is saved for our board office budget. This is an increase from last year because starting in fiscal year 25, the board does receive some of the Blueprint for Literacy money to support the operations of that. And I did outline that this year is a little higher for the Blueprint money because we had about $500,000 that we had extra for one-time information costs that once we go through that information process, we'll go back to. And so we still continue to have the $500,000 contingency in the current fiscal year for our Ed system. We are still waiting on the final settlement from the FCC for that. We've been waiting since. For our fiscal year 25 budget, it is mostly flat. We did receive funding for covering the salary compensation and benefit increases, but it was otherwise mostly flat. And we are working to reduce our reliance on the SGF to be able to continue to operate all the programs. I've outlined in our table, which is page 4 of your own document, we have several different funding sources within the office. That is SGF, private post-secondary fees, which is from our private post-secondary fees we regulate, other fees and private grants, which is our student health insurance, our cable retirement fees, our GED fees, the federal Carl Perkins career and technical education, and our adult basic education grants, and then other federal grants, which, as you'll see, we don't have for this year. That is because that is just ARPA and CARE money, which is for expenditure categories, we have several items outlined. The biggest one is compensation, and the board office currently has 63 FTE, which includes new staff for the literacy. And the very last page of this packet is the organizational chart. This is new from previous years because we now have chief of staff, and underneath the chief of staff is the Office of Literacy, Communications, and Government Relations. Do you have any questions on the budget?
The column that reads private ESVs, like that's about half of what it was last year. There any glaring reason?
There was it was relied on in reports of one-time costs
Okay.
that will not be here.
Thank you.
Professional services?
Cost of social services? No, that's. her-
No, the
No,
under
'cause it went up to
professional
100,000.
services, that's a significant increase.
Yeah. Leave it a one-time cost. I can confirm.
I suspect that that is actually for our literacy activities.
Oh, you're correct. That's right. It is a
So-
$500,000. That is where that implementation is in professional services for the literacy account.
But I guess looking at it, 24 was the exception because 23 was 794. It dropped way down at 24.
In 23, we did a lot of remodeling, so that's where some of those costs fall in, was in that bucket also, because that's when we remodeled the office space, needs to be a downstairs.
Richard Winter.
Morning. Question about the staff compensation line. That's moved in approximate amounts. That's moved from 3.8, almost 3.9 million in 23, 4.8, about $1 million increase. Generally speaking, what we spend more money on? Where'd that $1 million?
So in both of those are 2.5% increases across the agency. We also have added an extra FTE position between 23 and 24, and then 3 extra for the blueprint literacy between 24 and 25.
So how many FTE did we add in those two? And they are in what area?
So one of the action positions is the staff position that was a new FTE, and then we had 3 in the blueprint for literacy. And the 5th one, I think, was actually just a position for vacant and.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Becky? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Winter,
Second.
second by Regent Dykus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Becky. All right, staying with Becky, received Kansas Board of Regents internal audit for alumni account.
The alumni account is an account that is held at the Kansas University Endowment. It is funded from the 6 state universities, and it is used for items such as for hospitality and board events that are not who we can't run the state system. Because it is an external item, we have an internal person that we use it. Kitty DeMars is our Associate Director of Accounting. She does not do any work on this account specifically. It is myself and one other person in our agency that control this, but she is completely outside of that. So she conducts the audit at the end of the year. She conducted it this year, and she found no discrepancies in the financial transactions or deviations from the use and procedures of the plan.
Short and sweet. Any questions related to the internal account or internal audit for alumni account? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve.
Do we receive that one, or do we actually?
It's up to the will of the committee. If they'd like to, certainly can.
Yes,
Just accept it.
John? Yes. That's very good. Good suggestion.
I rescind my motion.
Thank you, Becky. All right, now to board agenda items under fiscal affairs. First of all, I know there were a lot of items on the consent agenda. Are there any of the consent agenda items that Vice President Frisbee, either you would like to make a comment about, or any of the CFOs, or any questions from the regions?
I think we covered this ground on the agenda call. I know Regent Rolfe, you weren't able to join us, but if you had any questions that you had.
Got through it?
We're tearing down several more buildings and spending a little bit of EDF for continuing consulting report for our capital renewal initiative. And they're adding a few or changing a few capital plans.
Very good.
Do we have any money left in the ability to tear down buildings?
We do have a little bit residual and we do expect that that will get consumed next month.
Any other questions or discussion related to the consent agenda items? Not, would entertain a motion to recommend approval to the full board.
So moved.
Got a motion, Regent Roth,
Second.
second by Regent Dykus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, consent agenda is recommended for approval. Moving into the discussion agenda, receive fiscal year 2026 housing and food service rate adjustment proposals submitted by the state universities. Vice President Frisbee, anything you want to add before we ask each of the institutions to give us a brief overview?
The only thing I would add, Mr. Chairman, is I provided a little bit of context or tried to last evening to give some context locally for each county where we have on-campus residence halls or dorms or apartments. This is a point of reference. Where else might a student be seeking housing and for attending one of our state universities? The summary, of course, the standard spiel on page 70 of your board agenda gives a more modest option for what students would experience, and then a more renovated or contemporary or unlimited dining option on the top of page 71. And then I'd like to also give national context for what happened in the current year nationally. And we've seen slightly above 4% increases nationally for the current year. This is looking out the coming year. And we've got the 6 state universities arrayed in alphabetical order this year. And would hope that maybe the CFOs could give a little rendition of what they're proposing.
Sure. So let's maybe go in the order that it's in the board booklet. It looks like Emporia State is up first.
Morning.
Welcome.
I'm Angela Wilbram, and in the audience is Kayla Smith. She is our Director of Residential Life. We were just talking, this was actually my first meeting last year as interim. So yeah, it's a good meeting to start with. I just come home from Africa from a mission trip, and then they handed this to me and said, oh, by the way.
You must have done well because you're still here.
So I'll just do a really quick overview. ESU is proposing an overall increase of 1.84%, which includes a 0% increase on our housing rates and a 4.1% increase on our food plan cost. Last year at this time, we were in the middle of an RFP because our contract with Sodexo was ending. And we did select a new food service vendor, Fresh Ideas is who we went with. I believe Pittsburgh also used them. Bit of a bumpy start this summer. That was an interesting switch from someone who's been here for years and years and years, and a new one. And we started with an NCAA NCAA track meet on our campus, and so that was their first event. Literally had been on our campus for 3 days, so it was fun. But we're doing well. It's getting better. I think the kids liked this option. I think it was a good choice. We are going to increase though 4.1% just to align with CPIU, food away from home. It's consistently increasing, as well as just meeting our contractual requirements with Fresh Ideas. So that is the increase there. We're not increasing our housing rates for a couple of reasons. Our occupancy last year when I first sat here was 59%. And we were actually estimating that our occupancy this year would be 59%. We actually have increased to 65, almost 66% this year. Our estimated revenues last year was at 3.5 million, and we're actually coming in at 4 million. So 4% ahead there as well. Because our occupancy has been low, what that's allowed us to do is we've been able to accommodate more single and super suite rooms, which are generating higher revenue for those rooms, because that's been the traditional double rooms, and that's what our students want. So with the occupancy available, we've been able to do that. So we've also continued to move forward with our second year students living on campus with a discount of $1,000. Kayla says that really does impact the number of students that don't have to live there the second year to come back. So we are continuing with that. And it's early, but we are already seeing really good signs of housing applications this year over last year, which means we'd be well on track to be at least 75% full next year. So all good things there. Our operational costs have increased only slightly. Our debt service expenses, however, are expected to decrease in fiscal year 26 by over $700,000. Our students were involved in making these rate adjustments. They are both included in the residence hall representative and the Memorial Union Board, which votes on these rates. So based on the data, we're confident that our proposal will meet the expected service levels that our students expect while aligning with our goals to maintain affordability. Questions?
Thank you, Angela.
Can you help me understand the transfer in and out process? Is that to keep the ending balance at some spots,
Yes.
and where do you transfer that money in from?
Yes, so we have a balance that we try to maintain $1 million in their account. So you'll see that's part of that. Years ago, I don't remember when Schellingham was built, but when we went out for bonds and they did a projection, we knew there'd be a couple of years where it would be tight. And that transfer in is actually ESU helping fund that bond payment. So this year we're paying the principal, and next year you'll see that transfer has gone down to 787. That's us covering the interest, and hopefully by 2027 we won't be covering anything, and we'll be back covering all of it. But it is a general obligation bond, so.
Any other questions for Angela? Thanks, Angela. Just for clarification, I think Pittsburgh State uses a lab food service.
Oh, they use a lab?
Yeah. Yes. In case that ended up in the minutes. Right. Thank you again, Angela. All right, Wesley, Fort Hays State University.
So our goal this year is to increase housing by 1.5% and dining by 3.5%. It's overall net of 2.5%. And the reason for the dining increase is that we're not too different from Angela over here. We have a new food service provider that we signed the contract. This is their first year. We talked to them about what that might look like next fall, and they said we are going to raise your prices come July about 3.5%. So we're just passing along increase from our contractual obligations from our provider to make sure that we can keep our margins right on the dining side of things. The housing rate, we did a market analysis of housing in town and what they could get off campus, what they get on campus. Want to make sure that we were keeping with the market, but also increasing the affordability for our students. So 1.5% allows us to do that this year. So kind of a nice balance approach there for that for our students. We did talk to our Residence Hall Association. This is the student advisory group that lives in the residence halls, and asked them, what do you think about this proposal? And they approved this proposal. So what we're bringing forward has been vetted and approved by the students to use the services. We also plan forward to keep some of our projects in our facilities in good working condition. This plan looks into the future and keeps our reserve levels in a good place. Our reserve balance target is $3 million. We're above that right now. We know that, and so we're using some of those excess funds to do some capital projects in our dorms that were needing to be done. This year, we're looking at some roofs and some cafes, some tiling in the cafe, and some carpets that need to be replaced in the hall. So that $250,000 that you see on the capital expenditure that coming out this year, that's what those are for. Those pre-planned. We know we got to get those done to keep that the facility in good working order. Occupancy is looking really good. This last year we've been at 97%. We're looking to be at 98%. And our enrollments and our applications for that have been really solid so far this fall as well. So I think that's what we're looking to have, a really high occupancy rate on our using our dorm, which is great for us. There is one fee I wanted to make sure you guys recognize it because it's kind of in the schedule, kind of in a different place. There's a fee there That's going up from, we're asking to go from $40 to $50 for the application fee on the additional fees area. And the reason for that is because we were working once again with our residential call council. And what we heard from them is that there is, we charge early drop fee penalty. So if students sign up for the dorms, but then they end up not coming, then they have to pay a fee to drop the contract. And the students wanted that time period to go lower. So right now, if they haven't dropped by mid-April, then they would owe that early drop penalty. So we're gonna push that to where they don't have that early drop penalty until June to be responsive to what we're hearing from students. But in order to make up the revenue that we lose from having that drop penalty, this $10 fee will basically make them wash. It doesn't really make us better or worse. It just being responsive to what students are asking us to do. So wanted to note that, because that was a little different on ours, but it's there. And I still think we're a great value for our students, even with this increase. So that's what we're hoping to do.
Right. Any questions for Wesley? Richard Whitman.
Wesley, generally speaking, who's your competition? How aggressive are they being this past year? Give me an idea about the competitive climate for housing.
Yeah, so for housing, I mean, obviously there's the competition that happens from other universities, right? You always take a look at where you sit in the market from other universities in Kansas, but also in the region, Nebraska, Kearney, some of the other places that are close to us. So we always look at that, but also you have to look in town because we have the Avenues area kind of near campus where a lot of students live off campus, and you have to look at what if a student wanted to live off campus, what's that experience look like and how much they're gonna charge? What are the town folks who own these private little apartments that sometimes are not actually very well maintained, to be honest. But what are they charging the student to live in those, and are we competitive when you compare, they get internet, they have access to laundromats, they have all the electricity paid for by living on campus. There's a lot of amenities that happen for living on campus that they won't get if they live in a private place for free at least. But you have to look at all those and sort of make an evaluation of are we within market. That's what we look at.
And generally speaking, what's the trend been in terms of effective competitiveness from the private sector?
Yeah,
Are they becoming more competitive with you or less so? How would you assess that?
yeah, it kind of went up for a little while there, and it's sort of plateaued recently to where the rental prices in town haven't gone up nearly as much. Like with the economy, the interest rates being high, I think that's making people less. So the actual prices of things have stabilized. I don't know that they've come down greatly, but they haven't been continuing to go up.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Wesley? All right. Thank you, Wesley. And it's been mentioned a couple of times. I want to make sure we thank the institutions for engaging the students as you consider this, because obviously it's a big part of their overall cost of attending our university. So thank you for getting their buy-in as you consider this. All right, next up, our host, Kansas State.
Thank you. K-State's recommending or proposing a 1.9% increase to our traditional double room. That represents about 70% of the total inventory within our system. And then we have some alternating price increases on a couple of the other suites due to the high demand to those for those rooms. That helps us kind of keep that price then lower for the rest of the traditional level for the students. Meal plans for the primary option would increase by 2.6%. One of the key differences from what you've heard with Emporia State and Fort Hays State is that K-State is a self-operated dining center. And so what you'll notice, especially in our financials, is that our salary costs are going up quite a bit, primarily because we needed to increase that minimum wage that we were paying our cooks, our service workers, our custodians. FY24 was actually a really difficult year for us due to turnover because our wages were so low compared to the market within the city. So in fact, we even had to, at some point, they were so critical, we ended up going to a couple of temp agencies to try to bring in some additional staffing so that we can continue to provide that service level that we needed to. So we've increased that base wage from $10.68 to $15 per hour. And that has made a huge difference in our turnover rates within the system. So if you look at our financials, you'll see due to that high turnover, our costs were pretty low in 24. You'll see them increase quite a bit in 25, estimated 26. That's getting our staffing levels back to healthy levels, but also due to that increased cost. The other area of investment that we're making is in our capital improvements within our facilities, addressing deferred maintenance. Coming out of COVID pandemic, we saw several years where we didn't do much investment into our facilities, primarily because we were trying to regain appropriate cash balances and reserves for the system. So cutting costs where we could, can't do that forever. So we're seeing increased investment back into our facilities to make sure that they are maintained appropriately. So those are the two primary drivers that are kind of pulling in with that rate increase, along with those inflationary pressures that we experience.
Very good. Any questions for Ethan? All right. Thank you. All right, pinch hitting for Doug Ball, who's pinch hitting for Dan Shipp. I want to ask Dr. John Bartlow to come on up, have a seat, and tell us about Pittsburgh State University. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy to be here. So our story is similar to many of the other stories that we hear around the table. Overall, we're proposing an average of a 3.8% increase for our residence halls as well as our dining plans. That range is about 2.7 to 3.9% is what we're looking at. And similar to what many of you were saying, those increases are driven by increased dining costs, increased maintenance needs, increased staffing needs, and of course, utilities. Our food service, we're in year 2 of our food service contract with Aladdin, and their contract states that they could raise their fees anywhere between 2 and 5%. Last year, I believe CPI was 5.1% and they raised 5%. So we are anticipating that they are going to raise it at least 2.5 to 3% this year. So we tried to figure those costs into this. Additional cost, when we're talking about maintenance, very similar to what K-State just said. During COVID, we were really concentrating on maintaining. And we have a new director of university housing and residence life. I am 18 months into my new role, overseeing student affairs and housing and residence life. And I think really we are seeing a lot of things that maybe hadn't been addressed in the past. And a lot of that was due to COVID. So really trying to put some money into our facilities. We had a $1.5 million HVAC project on our dining hall this summer. We met with our IT folks on campus. We have really, it's pretty urgent, a $300,000 IT project upgrading Wi-Fi. That's not anything that we can really kick the can down the road any further on. So that is something that we're going to have to tackle this year. Hot water heater, $150,000, new roofs, $2 million. So lots and lots of maintenance that we need to address at this time to ensure that our facilities are staying at the level that we need them to be for our students. Also, Maria and I were talking this morning. If you look at our housing staff is at 7 FTE compared to 13 in 2018. And so our numbers in our residence halls are continuing to rise again to pre-COVID numbers. So that's something that we are very excited about. We're up 3% this year. We're over 1,000 students in our residence halls once again. We're anticipating 72% occupancy for the following fiscal year. So we're trying to plan for that. Having more residents in the halls, of course, we would like to have more professional individuals to ensure that those students are having the best possible experience. I think one of the things that's been most eye-opening to me in this new role has been the role that university housing and residence life plays in the retention of our students. And so I just have gained great respect for what happens in university housing. And so, the more time and effort that we can spend with those students to not only ensure that they have a great dining experience, but they have a great living experience, that's important to us. And so that's something that we are taking mindful of as we move forward with this as well. We, similar to other institutions, we did take this to our Residence Hall Association last month, and they very strongly supported everything that we proposed to them and our reasons for this. So we feel comfortable in that manner as well. We always try to ensure that we're engaging our students, not only those who live in the residence halls, but also talking quite a bit to our Student Government Association, who I advise as well on campus. So not a completely different story than many of our other universities, but that is our plan moving forward, and I stand for any questions.
Questions for Dr. Bartlow?
Thanks. All right, thanks for the opportunity.
Question, Chair.
Yes, Regent Winter. Yes, sir.
It's not gonna be that tough a question.
Yes.
That you have to brush out. Homelessness in students. We can't ignore that issue when we're talking about the budget issues. To what extent, if any, you all see any change, any increase in homeless situation for students?
You know, I wouldn't say we've seen a great increase, but it's interesting you asked that question, because Maria and I, just on our drive up here yesterday, we do have a student who was in our residence halls, had some extenuating circumstances. He is no longer in our residence halls, and we are working with various entities on in our community as well as on campus. So Spark Wheel, Catholic Charities, because we want to ensure that clearly this young man needs a place to stay, even if it's not in our residence halls. But that's probably an outlier. I don't know, Maria, if you're aware of any instances in your last 18 months of the role.
I was gonna say, there hasn't really been a lot that we've had. When students do have face issues, they come and talk to us, and if we're able, JV Rank, they have a great partnership with our financial aid director or that office. So we're able to reach out to them and ask, hey, what aid do we have for these students? Is there anything that we can do to help them to have a residence, like a residence hall room? So then that way they aren't just on the street.
I'm very proud of the relationship that we have with our colleagues on campus, as well as with our colleagues in the city of Pittsburgh, to address problems like this. And Blake, you know that well. I mean, I think we all work together exceptionally well. And certainly when a student has an issue on campus, I think part of the really positive things about our campus, our size, is we know who to talk to, and we figure out how to fix that problem as best we can for the students.
Spark Wheel is actually a truly great partner. I'm not sure if everyone has that on their campuses or not. But it's something that we started, I think it's about 18 months ago as well. And so they're a great resource. I actually worked with Megan at the end of last spring, because there was a student who, she was in the foster care system, and she was like, okay, the rest of the are clothing. I can't go move back in with my family. Where am I going? So I partnered with her and talking about what options do we have and how can we get them connected. So, and we extended her stay in the hall, so then that way she can waive that fee that we typically do sometimes for interim students. So that way we could be able to accommodate that.
Okay, just a very quick poll of the other institutions. Are you seeing any significant or meaningful increase in homelessness among students, other than the one-off kind of situation talked about?
Here's what I would add. Kansas State, Derek Jackson. I would say it's hard to find a student that lives homeless. I think they're couch surfing, and you hear that. My wife's in the special ed in this community. I think we see some transitional students that are facing financial difficulties. I know our Cats Cupboard, our food pantry, has really seen significant increase from use from our student community from food costs. So you're probably onto something. I know we have similar transitional times. We don't close completely, so we always find places for students to live, but it comes up, and it's there's moments when you're really greedy for that student, and because they don't have places to go, and so you really do want to give them a place that is comfortable and they can manage to live their lives successfully in. And so it is difficult as prices escalate. And in our community, our prices off campus are growing faster than what our on campus prices are. So sometimes we're the only option for affordability for some of our students. In part, they struggle to get their down payments. They can't open up utilities. And so if they can't get that nest egg of dollars available, where the university does step in and do that, it kind of gives us a place to support our students.
Thank you.
Yes, Angela.
So for us, what we found is our nursing program came to us and told us that a lot of the senior nursing students are giving up their housing in town because they go to clinicals somewhere else. And so the couch surfing thing is happening. And so I know that we have been in contact and been working with a couple different areas, and housing for our nursing students is providing them at least 8 weeks in the dorms at a reduced cost with some food available for them as well. So we are addressing that with the nursing students that we found that are giving up their homes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's good job. All right, University of Kansas, Jeff DeWitt.
Thank you. And our story is not dissimilar to the other ones you just heard. We're proposing a 3% increase in the traditional two occupancy apartments and a 5% increase in dining. And really what's driving this has a lot to do with the capacity issues we're running into. We had our largest freshman class, 5,323 total enrollment at both campuses, KUMC and Lawrence is 30,770. So it's the largest we've ever had in our history. And if you go back to, COVID era of how many students we had in housing, we had 4,013. We now have 6,060. And so that's required us to lease Naismith, 495 beds. Hawker, we're master leasing that from Endowment, 216 beds here, which is across the street from the football stadium, 202 beds. So we're doing lots of leases that are not exactly the least expensive way to do this. At the same time, we have Jayhawk Towers in the middle, the two towers in the middle along on our campus that are dark, and we're going to be demolishing. We're going to be bringing Lewis offline next year and doing renovations on that. And then at the Union, we have lots of our kitchen equipment at end of life that needs to be replaced. And we have air handlers, HVAC, and then there's elevator issues in some of the buildings. So we have this record enrollment at the time that our assets really need to have some major renovations. So these are kind of hold serve rates. We had huge discussions about, we don't want to have these go up so much that they impact our ability to maintain our enrollment levels. We got to keep it affordable because the rates, going back to other comments in the Lawrence community, are going up quite a bit. And there's probably supply challenges inside the city of Lawrence as well. And so we are having major discussions with developers and looking at all our options going forward. We actually engaged a very detailed long-range plan for both of these, where we're looking at deferred maintenance studies. We're looking at the profit and loss of every individual housing unit and how we best manage that. What do we really have to do for deferred maintenance? So all that is going in together to try to figure out a plan going forward. But the challenges are, we want to keep a minimum balance of 90 days in housing. You'll see we get right at that level with this. 60 days on our dining, and we're at that level. But we're probably not putting enough money into the deferred maintenance side. So it is, how do you figure out what your solution is going forward? You'll also see on the agenda on, I guess, the non-budgetary items for some debt authority to take to the state. One of those is $100 million for housing. Doesn't mean we're going to build something or borrow for it, but we need that optionality, so to speak, because we may want to do something with private sector. We may want to buy something. We may want to build something. And we're going to figure all that out in the next 6 months. And we want that flexibility to be able to do that. So it is really about, older assets. It's about labor costs. The same issue that Ethan talked about. We have to raise our rates to be competitive with our labor and things like that. And we have Jack Credo, who's the head of dining, and Sarah Waters, who's the head of housing, and Tamara Durham, who's got student affairs in those areas and all these other areas. That's the job. I do not want the one that she has to deal with all these issues, including the homeless issues that you talked about, the food pantries and all those types of issues. They're here as well. But the 3% and the 5% are what I think we responsibly have to do the minimum maintenance to keep us going and to deal with all these types of issues. But we have to figure out these challenges, and we're going to be looking at private, public. We're going to be looking at what we can do ourselves, having these studies done to kind of figure this out in the longer run, because we can't keep going at the level of the enrollment that we're seeing, which is really, really good. But at the same time, our infrastructure is tapped out. We're 98% occupied. Sarah will tell you that's barely enough to deal with roommate complex, which, you know, we never happen. Right? So, but, you know, we are really at full 98% capacity, which we need to do. So, and as like we brought up last year, you know, Endowment stepped in last year and purchased Hawker so we can lease that, which is really been a big help. So that's our reason for our 5 and 3. It's really about keeping our minimum balances, dealing with their deferred maintenance, dealing with labor costs, and then figuring that out, that long-term plan out, which we're heavy into. Those two, Jack and Sarah, spent a lot of time with me, which I'm sure they're very happy about. But that is just as we all try to figure this out together. That's kind of where we're.
Questions for Jeff? Very good. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Wichita State University, David Miller.
Thank you, Richard. So for Wichita State, we're proposing no increase to our rental rates and a 3% increase in our meal plan. That 3% increase is an exact match to our contract with our dining provider. We feel real strongly that this aligns with the university's strategic plan to be accessible and affordable. We did hold 2 different sessions with our student groups to review the proposal. It was obviously very favorably reviewed with no increases in the rental rates. The reason that we're able to offer no increases in the rental rates are kind of twofold. One, historically, ever since Shocker Hall and Flats and Suites came online, we've enjoyed very strong occupancy rates. And those strong occupancy rates have allowed us to build up pretty decent reserves. And so now we're at the point in which we can start to manage all of that better holistically and maintain the rates as they currently exist. The other thing, like many of my colleagues, we were also fortunate to be able to do some refinancing back in 2020 and 2021. And so long term, that continues to help out our finances as well. Happy to stand for any questions.
Just a note, we had, I forgot to mention, we went and reviewed ours with our student groups as well. And they were super.
Thank you.
And if I could, Regent, I forgot something. I did want to thank Vice President Terry Hall for her leadership in the housing operations, as well as Scott Jensen and Katie Austin.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead.
So the years you were 112, 102, 107, you just have a third bed in a bedroom room, or what concept?
If you don't mind, Regional, that's Terry Hall. Yes.
So the reason we can do that is because we have the built occupancy and then we have a capacity that's above that, because some of our spaces were so large, we were able to put extra beds in. So initially they were built for a single and then we're able to put 2 in. So that's why our occupancy stays so high.
Yeah.
Still within fire code.
That's important. Yeah. Yes, Richard Footer.
So I'm going to use an example I know something about, and is housing situation in Lawrence. You mentioned Hawker, which was a privately owned complex, and you were Endowment bought them.
Endowment purchased it, yes.
So I'm assuming, and maybe this is where my error comes in, that when Hawker was privately owned, almost all, 98% of the occupants were students. And if that's true, how is it that ownership of that particular unit by the university helps solve the bigger problem with housing writ large?
I think the answer is it doesn't. And I think that's why we're going to be in partnership with the city of Lawrence. And you'll see the Gateway project phase 2 coming forward in the near future. And it is about how can we partner together to get that addressed, because you're right, when we're leasing spaces that may or may not have had students in them, it's taking the supply out of the supply of Lawrence. And we need to work with, there hasn't been anything built in Lawrence apartments for quite a few years. I just had a study of the Gateway project that it was looking at the housing, whether housing was the right thing to put in that project. It is. And it explains that, and I've gotten, I don't know, 5 or 6 developers knocking on my door, wanting to build housing, but they want to know what an enrollment's going to be, right? And so I think it is a joint thing that Lawrence and the university need to solve together. And I think you'll see some proposals for that coming forward.
So you touched on my last question, that is, how do you project future housing needs, where we have this paradox of increasing enrollment in most, if not all, of our institutions. But yet, we're facing this enrollment cliff. Are you assuming that the enrollment cliff won't have a significant impact on student housing demand? Talk to us a little bit about that.
That's a great question. And it's one of the reasons we're doing all the scenario planning that we're doing with, do we take Lewis off? Do we tear, what do we renovate? What do we build? And, we're actually doing scenarios so we don't get caught with a white elephant. You build a new 700 unit, residence hall and then enrollment drops off and now you're at some lower occupancy rate. So we're looking at what are the public, private, university only, what Lawrence partnerships, all these scenarios that allow you to, have affordable housing for your students and deal with the fact that you might see 1,000 student drop off in a couple of years, depending on, what happens with enrollment. We're at 45% out of state. So our now reliance on our ability to recruit out of state while other states are trying to keep theirs is, something we're looking at. So we've run, what does our housing need to look like if we have this enrollment versus what our housing look like? We don't want to be any bigger than we think we're maxed out. We want to keep our enrollment at no bigger than that. But what if it drops? What should you do and what should you build? And that's why we're doing this planning. It's not an easy thing to answer.
Where do you keep the crystal ball?
We have multiple scenarios so we can see every universe, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions related to Wichita State or any of the proposals we've heard this morning?
I'd just say, hey, thanks for the preparation. Read through it's real straightforward, thoughtful of overall cost, but recognizing that there are still rising costs and the potential that could rise at a higher rate again. So it was actually feels like good stewardship to me.
You know, a thing or two about what food costs are looking like these days.
I've read that.
All right, if there are no more questions, would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the housing and food service proposals. That's just the first read. Okay, well then we'll wait till later on to do that. My apologies. All right, well, thanks for all the work that went into this and again, for all the engagement with the students. So, all right, moving on, later this afternoon, we'll hear a university campus master plan update from Fort Hays State University. Look forward to that with President Mason. Moving on to discussing and acting on board policy amendments for the system. Director Bristow.
This will be a follow-up to discussion and consideration that the board had at the June meeting, the first meeting, recommended updates to the facility policy to basically support the board facilities initiative. Some of these edits are cleanup, minor changes. Some are more substantive. The section about procurement. Okay, excellent. The section about procurement and statutory authorization for all the various delivery methods that are afforded to the university and state law based on the funding sources for certain projects are added into facilities policy for clarity and convenience of reference as the universities develop their project approaches. Also, one of the key points in this set of updates is acknowledging that the educational building fund would contribute to the board's maintenance assessment and just streamlines and makes all those funding sources basically accountable to that standard annual reinvestment in mission critical buildings. I think that's it in a nutshell. There are various changes, and I think everyone received it. Kind of a bullet point list of itemized all the changes, kind of a recap. I think page numbers were a little off what the final agenda was for. So if you have any questions about where to find those changes, happy to drill into that more detail.
Thank you, Director Bristow. Questions for Jack? Entertain entertain a motion recommending approval.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Winter. Second by Regent Roth. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on, act on request to amend fiscal year 2025 capital improvement project plan, approve program statement for construction of addition to and renovation of Marvin and Chalmers Halls, and act on request to seek legislative bonding authority for the School of Architecture and Design at the University of Kansas. So, Jeff DeWitt.
Thank you. This particular request is the program statement for a new architecture building. One of the challenges we have with that area is that our creditors have talked to us in the past about space and quality of space and the type of space you need for the program that we need.
They don't care about you.
There you go. Say whatever I want, right?
Whoever's up there obviously pulled the plug, didn't think you were very relevant.
There you go. I know without being recorded. So the request is a program statement for about $120 million project. It's in 3 phases. It's building a School of Architecture building. It's approximately $60 million. Then renovating 2 other buildings, Marvin's and Chalmers Hall, to basically encompass all the things you need in School of Architecture. You got to build a new, move, renovate, expand, all those types of areas that are in there. And so you'll see that program statement in there for that particular project. But it's contingent upon 2 things. One, getting authority from the state to bond fund $60 million, which is really phase 1, and then the fundraising that's going on for that particular project. And we also have a request in the budget that was submitted for a match, $10 million match is in there. So all those elements have to come together for that project to move forward. So you see the full program statement for the 3 phases. And the phases will depend on funding, and they are contingent upon, obviously, particularly the debt authority from the state to do the borrowing for that, which, as you see in our metrics, we're well below 5% with this and all the other ones requesting. So we have capacity. We can do twice as much, not that we should, but we have it built into the financial plan for the university to service that debt and to do that as a priority project because of the critical need of those and the age of those facilities.
Where are you servicing that definitely?
We'll be servicing it out of our general use fund and probably course and fees that come from the School of Architecture. So it'll be a mix of those sources. It'll be a pledge of the university.
Any other questions for Jeff? If not, entertain a motion to recommend approval.
So you've talked about, sorry. So you've talked about structural deficit before, but you've got the space.
We have margin now. So one of the comments that I've made in the past is we can't do these kind of projects because you're going to have margin. Well, we now for the first time ever have positive margins that allow us to do this. So structural deficit from the growth I talked about a minute ago and from the budget reductions a few years ago, we're now we're now generating positive margins. And now it's what do you do with that? Where does it go? And one of it would go toward the financing of this. So we are now out of our structural deficit. I think I can say officially, good work. And now it's about what kind of margins can you generate to do the things you need to do to be competitive. It's a different problem now. How do you use your margin?
And as you look at those margins, how do you stress test them against enrollment cliff and things like that? Just assume you can hold.
We run many scenarios on our financial statements, and we have several initiatives that Jayhawk Global, Jayhawk Flex, which is if there's an enrollment cliff, if there's an enrollment cliff and you're 100% reliant on 18-year-olds coming to college, you're probably. So we have a very significant strategy on, and the provost talked about this at the board not long ago. Competency-based education, Jayhawk, which is called Jayhawk Flex, Jayhawk Global. Conference and events is what stadiums is so important in that revenue. Continuous improvement, which is continued efficiencies and other elements that we're working on that make the enrollment cliff not such a big problem as it could be, although it still will be a challenge. But if you're 100% relying on 18-year-olds, you're probably going to have a challenge. And our strategy is not to keep that. And so we do stress tests on that. We run scenarios. What if Rome goes here? What can we do? So we're confident we can handle the debt service on this particular project. no matter what scenario happens, it's feasible and probable on the enrollment side because of these other strategies.
Anything else? Entertain a motion to recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Winter, second by Regent Dykus. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, those are all the items for this afternoon, right? One more. All right, on a roll.
Page 101. And then
Sorry for yelling. So, I guess, or not reading with glasses like I should. All right, act on request to authorize acquisition of real property, staying with Jeff DeWitt and the University of Kansas.
So the Rock Chalk Park, which is on the west end of Lawrence, I can see it from my back porch where I live, so I'm very, very, very familiar with it. It is a facility that was done about 10 years ago with a private developer and an endowment to develop what I would say are really, really top of the line facilities for softball, soccer, track and field, and tennis. And those have, it started out, the tennis and the indoor softball hitting facility have been added since the original agreement. That is a facility that really is critical to our Title IX compliance because it's mainly women's sports that are out there. And I would argue the Big 12 title by our women's soccer team is probably driven by having that world-class facility for them to train and play in. And it is a development that endowment did, and the cost of that for the next 30 years, $2.3 million. There is no way today that you could build that. The debt service ought to be that low. It'd probably be 4 times higher if we had to do that today. So it has been a really good project for the university. One of my areas of responsibility is real estate, and going back to the Hawker example, endowment purchased that facility for us because we needed to move quickly given our enrollment increase that was going. And endowment was the one that structured this deal to get in place to get these facilities built. But in the long term, that's really needs to be university property, and it needs to be, those are university assets. And in the changing world of athletics, which I'm sure someday in a future board meeting, we'll have to have a large discussion about that. We want to have that to be university land and university facilities. And when we're moving forward with the Gateway project, that's going to be a public-private partnership that we'll talk about in the future. That's where endowment can, kind of lead it, get it going, but they are the kind of the front of it. But when they get it all stabilized and figured out, we want it to come into the university. So that's really what this is about. It's been 10 years. It's now a stable, really good public asset that will bring the ownership into the university. And it has not paid property taxes for the last 10 years because of an IRB, and it will be a university asset, just like all of our athletic facilities all over our campus. So this is, endowment plays their role, Crossing, Gateway, Hawker, this particular project, but whenever they do their thing and get it going, it's time to bring it into the university. So this is kind of the long-term part, and we have a really, really great partnership with them. They've really stepped up on other projects recently, and this is one that those are really nice facilities. I don't know how we'd be able to apply the title on that project at that, but it's now time to turn it back to university, and that'll be University of Kansas land, and University of Kansas assets.
Very good. Questions for Jeff? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Winter. Second by Regent Rolfe. All those in favor?
No, I'm gonna
Okay.
abstain from voting.
Okay, Regent Dykus will be abstaining from the vote.
Not because I thought.
Right, due to your involvement with the KU endowment. Yes, so minutes will reflect that. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on to item number 6, act on request for changes to appropriation language for the fiscal year 2026 budget for the system. Vice President Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting on page 113 of your board agenda materials, you'll see several pages of notes about things that our staff have come up with to propose changes for purposes of the appropriation bill. You approved the unified appropriation request in September, and then there's all the technical work that must go into putting that into appropriation language. And so there are just a few things. Many of them are somewhat technical, like recognizing for the state universities funds that they need to implement the Campus Restoration Act, and allowing state general fund appropriations to carry over that are unspent for capital projects 1 year to the next. And then reroute money that got pushed to the State Finance Council last year, or this year actually, and put it back in the state universities' budgets where it would have normally been. So those sorts of things. Number 5 is a policy question. For several years, our office has asked the legislature, and they have adopted our recommendation to appropriate our line items for student financial aid another year out. So not only 26, but also for fiscal year 2027. The award cycle for student financial aid does not mesh well with the budget process and the legislative session. So in order to let schools know what we're working with or what we can make awards on earlier, they let us have the funding a year out. This creates more work for staff to track, but it's well worth it. We are asking that the legislature stop depleting one of our federal funds with transfers from our agency to the State Department of Education. We have an old federal E-rate fund where from the time when we used to operate the Can Ed network, but that was decommissioned by the legislature in 2015. So we don't get any revenue in it. So there are reserves, and Becky referenced a contingency where we know we have an outstanding settlement with the FCC. They don't seem interested in settling up with us, so we leave that contingency there. But the Department of Education has been making transfers out of that fund to their agency for IT coordinator activities. So we're asking that that stop because the funds are going to go away. We don't get any new revenue there. Anyway, those sorts of things. Also requesting that some provisos that have been changed for several years, such as for tiered and non-tiered funding for the 2-year colleges, simply say, here's the amount to the State Board of Education, appropriate or allocate the fund across the schools as you would according to all the other statutes that govern how those funds are distributed, rather than specifying an amount to each individual college in the budget bill, which can create challenges for us. It's all sorts of things like that. We do have an old ethnic minority fellowship program, Balance, so we are proposing to move that to another fund so that we can make use of it for students seeking to become a teacher. So we can use that for the benefit of some students. It's just been sitting there idle for several years, many years. We'd like to be able to use that. So we're going to ask for that authority. And then just delete some old outdated language they adopted in the 24th session.
Right, very good. Questions for Vice President Frisbee? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Roth.
Second.
Second by Regent Dykus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, Elaine. All right, Director Bristow, any progress to report on related to the State University Capital Renewal Initiative and Campus Restoration Act?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Benson. Yeah, just a quick update. The board staff and the universities are working to review and finalize the 2024 University Facilities Report. Back in 2021, the board updated policy and requires an annual report. So that will be presented to the board in December. And that report will also be submitted to satisfy the statutory requirement of submitting to the legislature biennially. So have that ready for you in December.
Very good. Thank you, Director Bristow. Any audit findings to come before the committee this morning, Vice President Frisbee? Okay. All right. Anything else to come before the committee this morning? Yes, Richard.
If you don't mind, I want to just back up real quickly on the homeless situation for students. I assume that all of the directors of housing that are here and CFOs see that question of student housing as one in which they should be involved. Not necessarily to take a bunch of money, build brand new facilities for students that can't pay for homeless students. But the problem is so significant to us all. I would certainly expect that our housing folks and CFO, our financial folks would find themselves at a table where that discussion is occurring. So I just want to lay that out, that getting into specifics. I'm sure that's probably the case, but if it's not, it certainly should be.
Well, last time we actually pulled the student body presence about at Washburn had the largest population of homeless students. There's gonna be conversations around that. Include them.
Anything any of you wanted to add?
Tamara Durham, who's here, I think the challenges we're having is food insecurity. That's the one we all see very vividly in our pantries and other things. That is a significant thing we need to address, but it's a food insecurity and how do we make sure people, you think about people going to college, not being able to get a meal, that's really needs to be addressed.
Think about how free and reduced lunches grown in our state over time. There's gonna be a bigger population of people that food insecure at home before they show up.
I think this issue also relates to the whole issue of the enrollment cliff and so on and so forth. All of our institutions need to be more acutely aware of those issues that may not have been presented to as a fiscal issue. But for goodness sake, when we have students that can't eat, they can't afford getting kicked out of their housing, that's a problem we all have to put our shoulder to. So because I'm sure that you're already doing that, I would just turn that into a thank you for being involved and staying involved.
Anything else this morning? All right, well, thanks everybody for your time. Thank you as always for working you and your team. And with that, we are adjourned.